It is election night in America, my friends. If you're getting to watch this live, make sure you hit that share button right now so we can bring everybody into the conversation. It is Verdict with Ted Cruz on election night. Senator, I'm excited. It's fun. I know you love this as much as I do. It's our Super Bowl. When you look at tonight, I think we should go back and kind of set the stage. This is an election where many Americans are upset. Exit polls are showing that people are dissatisfied with their lives. And the economy was the issue. Having control over your kids and your family, COVID, those are big issues in this election. And that's why we're looking at what looks like a big red wave.
Yeah, no, I think tonight's going to be a big election. I think it's going to be a good election. I think we're going to see Republicans take both houses. Where we are right now, some of the early results, it hasn't been as big of a wave as I'd hoped it would be. We've had some close races go the other way so far. I think we're still on a path for a sizable majority in the House, and I think we're still on a path for a majority in the Senate. I think we're probably at 52 or 53 Republicans right now. I'd hoped we'd be as high as 54. We're not going to get there in all likelihood. But I think 52 or 53 is a very real possibility.
Let's talk about this midterm in general so people understand expectations. I think that's important. This was a midterm election that was in the favor, the map was, and the races that were up for Democrats.
Yes.
So for us to have a win tonight and get back the House and the Senate, that is a victory. No one should be disappointed or sad when you look at this map. This map favored the Democrats, and people need to understand that as we start out tonight.
Well, we had two cross-cutting dynamics. What favored the Democrats was the map. Republicans have a lot more vulnerable seats to defend than Democrats did. What favored Republicans was historical trends. Typically, the party out of power picks up seats in the midterm election, particularly when you've got unified government and an unpopular president. You look at Joe Biden's approval ratings, they're in the tank. You look at, I think, objectively, the record of the Democrats has been abysmal. The top three issues in the country consistently have been inflation, especially gas prices, crime, and illegal immigration. All of them, Republicans have a double-digit advantage. All of them are caused in very significant part by disastrous policies from the Democrats. That being said, we've still got some states. So, for example, just a couple of minutes ago, they've called the state of Ohio. That was a big win. As you know, I went and campaigned with J.D. Vance. That doesn't surprise me.
That was, and people need to understand, that was a really big win because Democrats spent a lot of money there. They thought that this was a guy that could not get elected. They thought it was going to be a solid victory for Democrats. And the issues there, Vance talked about very clearly. He listened to the voters. And I think that was the biggest mistake Democrats made, is they refused to listen to the voters and what mattered to them. They tried to push the issue of abortion till the very end. Even early this morning, they were talking about abortion. That clearly was not on the minds of the average American voter. It was the pain at the pump. It was the pain when they went shopping in the grocery stores.
Well, look, abortion was on the minds of Democratic activists and very left-leaning voters. Abortion helped turn them out. But at the end of the day, you know, what struck me about Ohio is it followed a pattern, actually very similar to Arizona, where the Democrats were being profoundly dishonest. And this is actually true in many of the races across the country. But if you watch Tim Ryan, who was the Democrat nominee, who spent a whole career pitching himself as a, quote, moderate Democrat. Now, he's voted with the left over and over and over again, but he doesn't scream and light his hair on fire and, like, dance around naked with an anarchy sign. So I guess in today's Democrat Party, that makes you somewhat moderate. But if you looked at Tim Ryan's ads in Ohio, he would run on, I want to secure the border. He just about put on a MAGA hat and said, vote Trump. I mean, it was really striking, and it was wildly dishonest. And I do think the voters of Ohio got that and said, come on now. It reminds me of Arizona, where Mark Kelly, his ads, you'd think the guy was a Republican. Everything he says in his ads, secure the border now. I can tell you, I've served the last 2 years with Mark Kelly. Every single vote we've had on immigration, Mark Kelly has been against us 100% of the time, consistently against securing the border. And so Ohio was a good win. You look at Florida. The numbers in Florida for both Ron DeSantis and Marco Rubio were stunning. Big double-digit victories. I don't know where they'll end up at the end of the night, but could easily be 15% or north of 15% for both of them. Those are big victories. Florida has changed. Florida, you and I both remember, in the era of George W. Bush, the 2000, 2004 elections, nail biters, Florida was a 50-50 state. Florida has turned red significantly, and I think COVID clearly played a part in it. I think Ron DeSantis did an excellent job dealing with COVID, and I think people fled to Florida and fled to Texas because they wanted sanity. Both Florida and Texas, we've had big double-digit red victories because the people here want to be free and they don't like those crazy Democrat policies.
Let's get into the fun part of the night, and that's calling races. And if you are watching us right now, wherever you're watching us, please hit that share button. If you're watching us on Twitter or on Facebook, hit the share button right now so other people know that we're live. We just got word that the governor's race in Georgia has been called. Yep. This was a pipe dream for the Democrats. They were hoping that Stacey Abrams, who never conceded last time, would be victorious this time. She's gone down there. It's over. You've got a Republican that is going to win that one again. That was one Democrats. It's going to sting for them because they wanted Stacey Abrams. She was a part of the radical socialist left, and it's a failure there in the state.
Well, it is stunning that Stacey Abrams, the incumbent Democrat governor of Georgia, was defeated. And of course, I say that tongue-in-cheek, but she famously insisted after losing that race, no, I won. I'm the governor. And it was, you and I have talked about how a couple of weeks ago I went on The View, and The View started screaming that election denier, which is their crazy talking point. And I said, well, how come? Because they wanted me to swear on 13 Bibles, although I don't think they actually allow Bibles on the set of The
doubt
View.
They do.
But they wanted me to swear on 13 somethings, communist manifestos or something, that Joe Biden was entirely legitimately elected, everything was fair and square, there was no voter fraud everywhere, and the Democrats are wonderful. And I'm like, okay, you guys are a bunch of crazy hypocrites, and how come you never asked Democrats to do that? How come you sat here cooing when Hillary Clinton said Donald Trump was illegitimately elected? How come you sat here fawning when Stacey Abrams said that Brian Kemp was illegitimately elected? How come you didn't have a word to say when Joe Biden said that George W. Bush was illegitimately elected? The rule for Democrats is if the Republicans win, it's illegitimate.
Yeah.
And if the Democrats win, anyone who questions the election is a crazy tinfoil hat-wearing lunatic.
It's got to be a lot of gratification for Kemp, I think, tonight to see that not only is it a victory, but it's a solid victory. They called it early there. Fox News called it early in a state where, before they were hoping this would be tomorrow or the next time we find it out. The voters rejected the radical defund the police. I think that's a big part of this. In Georgia, they wanted law and order, and they needed to know that they were going to have a solid economy, and that was something that Abrams could not come up with. That's why I think that's a huge victory overall.
Well, but I will say, in her defense, she's still the president of Earth.
That's true.
You remember Star Trek named her the president of Earth in these flowing robes, and it was a moment. Look, Hollywood is normally obnoxious, but it really was a gag reflex moment watching it. And it turns out that supercilious condescension towards the voters and self-righteousness actually doesn't sell very well in elections.
Let's talk about one of those other entertaining races, and this is another Democratic pipe dream. They were hoping they could say that Beto had finally won a race. At what point do people stop giving to this guy? I mean, seriously, the amount of money that has come in, this is not a little bit of cash from all over the country. He was the darling of the Democratic Party, another decisive defeat in his political career. How does anyone give him money moving forward? And I'm sure he's going to run for something else again, even though he had a big beatdown tonight.
Well, when he launched his gubernatorial campaign, reporters asked me what I thought, and I said, apparently Beto wants to get his ass kicked a third time. In 2018, he ran against me. The media was in love with him. Every story had the obligatory adjective Kennedy-esque. And you would have these reporters. They were like groupies at a Beatles or Rolling Stone concert. They would practically throw their panties at him, and that was just the male reporters. I mean, they were really in love with him. They'd say, "Oh, the hair, the teeth. He sweats. Oh my goodness, he sweats." Well, Beto raised over $80 million, ran the most expensive Senate race in the history of the United States against me, and we beat him. Then he ran for president, and he got crushed. Now he ran for governor, and he lost by double digits. I think
he's
it'll be
now more than 10 points down as we speak.
Yeah, I think it'll be 11, 12 points when all is said and done. They're still finalizing the numbers, but it's a double-digit loss. I just sent around on Twitter a meme of a picture of Beto saying, "Hey, Louisiana, my name is Beto, Beteux. Let's go Cajun, baby."
If you can't win, just move right until you find a place where they finally like you.
Either that, or he could always, try to go be Secretary General of the United Nations. If Stacey Abrams is the president of Earth, she and Beto are a powerful team.
There's a few useful idiots that I actually don't want to get rid of. One of those won tonight. I love that she won. AOC. I think she is a perfect poster child for the Democratic Party and what they really believe in. She says what other Democrats believe but won't say. She has won. I'll take that one as a loss for us tonight because I do believe she serves a great purpose for conservatives to say, hey, this is who they are. This is what they actually want to do. She actually says how crazy they are, and that's why she's so cringeworthy even to Nancy Pelosi. I didn't mind this one necessarily. I think she's a great poster child for the Democratic Party in 2022.
So look, I'll give a bit of a counter view on that, which, number one, it's not surprising she won. She's in an overwhelmingly Democrat district. But number two, I do think a lot of folks on the right dismiss AOC and then they characterize her as not very bright and a bartender. I think that's a mischaracterization. This woman is potent.
Yes.
She's got charm. She's charismatic. She's talented. Young people are crazy for her. And yes, she's a wild-eyed socialist. She's a full-on Marxist, even though she doesn't fully understand what that means. Anything on the left, she's for. But it is dangerous, the following she has with young people. And I worry sometimes on the right, people underestimate that because our people dislike her so much that conservatives assume everyone else has that reaction. I think there are a lot of young people who listen to her and are being misled by her, and I think she will remain a dangerous force. Look, Chuck Schumer and the Democrats in the Senate are terrified of AOC because she drives the Democrat Party, and I think that probably continues even after tonight.
I want to set the stage for people so you know kind of where we are right now. There are 10 Senate seats still left in play that are obviously people are looking at very closely right now. Right now, we are at 45 Republicans, 45 Democrats. There are 187 House seats left in play. Right now, you've got 152 Republican Ws, 96 Democrats. You feel very confident about the House. This is going to be a referendum, I think, on Joe Biden. I think this is a referendum, obviously, on Nancy Pelosi. I want your prediction. Nancy hinted that she may retire. Do you think she's going to retire and claim it's family?
100%. I think Nancy is gone. I think this time next year, Nancy Pelosi is a resident of Florida. I think she literally retires to bright red Florida. She's not going to be Speaker next year. We're going to have a majority. I had hoped for a majority as big as 40, 50 seats. I don't think it'll be that big. I think it'll still be a sizable majority. We've lost a few close races. They just right now called the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, over Lee Zeldin. That's a heartbreaker. New York is a tough state, but apparently rampant crime. New Yorkers still don't want to change. And I will say, one of the things that struck me about this election, this remains a polarizing election. There is a red America and there's a blue America. 55-45 was the margin in the New York governor's race with 64% in.
Well, and you look
in their right mind? Who are the 55% of people that say, yeah, this has been good for New York? You shut down the whole state. You killed elderly people in nursing homes. You let criminals out of jail the day they commit crimes. Murder rates are skyrocketing. And yet 55% of liberals in New York say, hunky-dory sounds good to me. And it really, it's the mirror image of we've got double-digit victories in Texas and Florida and a double-digit victory now in New York.
And look at Michigan. They've just called that now. Whitmer, who, again, she had one of the worst records on the economy. She shut down businesses and small businesses longer than almost anybody else in the country. She had as big, if not a bigger issue with COVID patients being forced into nursing homes. Same thing that happened in New York City. And yet still, she is clearly going to win that thing by probably a bigger margin than most people were thinking.
Look, I worry, and we've talked about a lot, the tribalism. The margin right now with 34% in is 51.7% Whitmer, 46.7% Dixon. So closer than New York.
Yeah.
But still a significant
victory. And these are 2 places where we were hopeful. Maybe you could flip one of these.
I thought both of them we had a real shot at. It's why I have mixed sentiments tonight. I think it's going to be a good victory. It's not as big a victory as I had hoped. And what it tells me is the tribalism we have in this country is real. That people put on their jerseys.
Yeah. And they vote. They root for their team no matter how bad their team is.
And it's either a red jersey or a blue jersey, and they will ride that ship down the waterfall and into the rocks. And it really is. That is dismaying. There was a race in Virginia, congressional race that I was focused very closely on. Abigail Spanberger versus Yesli Vega. Yesli's fantastic. Conservative Hispanic woman, the daughter of immigrants from El Salvador. She's a police officer. She's married to a soldier. She just lost that race by three points. And it was an incredibly close race. That's one of the examples where it's a district where even as bad as inflation and crime and illegal immigration, there's some liberals who dug in. Now, I will say one of the things that struck me, you know who was a late endorser for Abigail Spanberger?
Who was that?
Liz Cheney.
Well, there you go.
Liz Cheney galloped in. Now, it was right after she endorsed Nancy Pelosi, so she's a full-on Democrat now, but it was still really striking that Liz Cheney now rushes out and says, don't give me a conservative Hispanic woman. No, I want a Democrat who votes with Nancy Pelosi. That's who I am. That was unfortunate. So you look at some of our Senate victories. Ohio's a big one. Florida's meaningful. There was some concern that Rubio could be close. He's going to have won by double digits. That's good. Missouri, you had a retiring senator, Roy Blunt. Eric Schmidt, who I campaigned for, who I endorsed early on. Eric won and won sizably. That's good. So those are some seats we've taken off the table. An unfortunate loss, New Hampshire. New Hampshire was a state we could have won. Maggie Hassan was in the 40s in her approval. She was a very vulnerable Democrat. We lost that race. Colorado is a race we could have won. Michael Bennett, very low name ID, no record of accomplishment. We could have won that. We lost that. So those are two Senate losses that were heartbreaking. I think control of the Senate is going to come down to a handful of states right now. We've got to hold on in North Carolina. I think we probably do with Ted Budd, but that race hasn't been called yet, and it's closer than it should be.
It's close, yeah.
And North Carolina historically has been a very purple race where races are by a point or two, and that could be where it ends up. I think we hold on to North Carolina, but it's possible for us to lose it. Look, Minnesota, they just called 57-39. You think about
Waltz over Jensen there, and a lot of people thought that was going to be closer in a state that was clearly their economy was affected by the COVID lockdowns. People thought that there was hopefulness there that would happen.
The Minneapolis riots, the burning of the cities, like
what do we want? Dead cops? When do we want them now? Pigs in the blanket, fry them like bacon. That started there,
and you wonder what is going on with. Like, what is the mind of a liberal voter that says, hey, I like being afraid when I go to work, when I take my kids to school. I like, having murderers released in my community. And part of it is, I think, I don't know, but I think some of these folks in blue states believe it can't be any different. That, of course, this is the way everyone is. They don't believe there's an alternative. But I think it's the tribalism. We're on this team. So this is who we root for. So what's control of the Senate going to come down to? It's going to come down to a handful of states.
Well, Oz and Fetterman is going to be one of the ones. I want to mention that one real quick because right now that one is extremely close with Oz and Fetterman. I am in shock how slow these numbers are coming in and how close it is. We're within a percentage point right now. Oz is down, but we also know if you know how to read that map, Republican areas are going to come in later. So that should tighten up a little bit, hopefully. Too early to call, too close to call there. And that's going to be a race that you're going to have to watch the rest of the night because it's that important.
Look, 4 states are the entire battle in the Senate. Pennsylvania, Georgia, Nevada, Arizona. Pennsylvania is a Republican seat right now. So if we lose Pennsylvania, that's a D+1. I hope that doesn't happen. It is neck and neck. I think Oz pulls it out, but it could easily go the other way. And I will say the pattern we've seen of these bluer states saying, damn it all to hell, it's like the guy at the end of Dr. Strangelove writing the bomb down. It feels a little bit like these Democrat voters are willing to do that. If we lose Pennsylvania and nothing else changes, that takes us to a Democrat majority in the Senate, 51 Ds. Now, I think we will win in Nevada. I think Adam Laxalt wins. And I think we will win in Georgia, although Herschel Walker...
I just got new numbers a moment ago. It is, and guys, tell me in my ear again, it's Walker's up 0.2% right now. That's how close that race is.
Okay, but it's worse than that, because the numbers I saw a minute ago is Walker was at 49 and Warnock was at 48.9.
Yeah.
They're both below 50.
Yep.
If they're below 50, guess what we're headed to?
Runoff.
A runoff on December 6th. We're doing this all over again, and it could be another runoff in Georgia determines control of the Senate. God help us if we do that. We saw that 2 years ago where the Democrats won, Warnock and Ossoff. That could happen again. So here's an easy scenario. Let's suppose we lose Pennsylvania and win Nevada. Georgia determines everything.
Everything.
And that could happen. So if you're a person of faith,
look at it on the screen there, guys. That's the numbers right now with the reporting it at 85.7% reporting. And that's the latest numbers. 48.98 to 49.00. But as you mentioned, if you don't get 50 plus 1, it doesn't matter because we're going to, like you said, a runoff. And
by the way, it doesn't matter who's first or second right now. So
yeah, as long as you're under 50, we go to this runoff.
So David Perdue and John Ossoff, on Election Day, Perdue was leading. He had more than Ossoff, but he was just under 50, and then in the runoff, Ossoff beat him.
All right, let's geek out on Georgia. If there is a runoff, what does that look like for the Republican strategy? What does that look like for the Democrat strategy? How much money is going to have to be raised? Because this is going to be, everybody in the country is going to go all in. This is going to be every operative
49-49.
in there.
It's dead tied is what they just put up.
Yeah.
1,757,000 votes to 1,758,000 votes. So it's 1,000 votes apart.
In a race with 1.7 plus million on each side, to be within 1,000 votes tells you how divided we are as a country. And I think Georgia, you go back to tribalism, what you mentioned earlier, Georgia's a great example of that. Georgia's a place, there's a lot of Democrats in Atlanta in that area, and there's a lot of Republicans in the outside areas and rural areas, suburban areas. You look at it there. And Fetterman and Oz right now, Fetterman is at 49.5, Oz at 48.2, a difference of 56,000 votes there with 76% in. That concerns me, obviously. This is the first time that I've seen Oz actually falling behind there.
All right, and we've got early numbers on Arizona. Kelly at 57, Masters at 39.7. That's not good. Now, it's only 48% in, and I don't have the breakdown of where it is, and they've got problems in Maricopa County. But
that's a big deficit of 244,000 votes down, the Republican candidate down. If you're his campaign manager right now, that's not what you want to see.
No. Look, a 20-point differential is bad. With roughly half the votes in, it almost like you can tease out, well, it's in places that it's not, that are supposed to be Democrat voting, but even so, that's not a great outcome. North Carolina, 50.8 Bud, 47.1 Beasley. Now that 95% is in.
I feel better about that because 95% is in. That's a 137,000 vote lead for Bud, the Republican there. That makes me feel better with 95%.
Yeah, that's
reporting.
almost a 4-point lead. I think Bud will hold on. But right now, Oz is losing to Fetterman. Now we'll see when the votes come in. Look, right now, Katie Hobbs is at 57% and leading over Kari Lake. Now, again, we don't know where those votes are coming from. So it may be that the Republican areas have not reported yet. But if we don't win Arizona, Nevada, which is neck and neck, Nevada is a purple state. And I will say, I think we're going to have enough to flip. We're going to have enough to flip control of the House. The fact that in these blue and purple states, you're not seeing a big surge of voters on the other side. At some point, you wonder, what the heck do these people have to do? Like how much do they have to make your life
How bad
suck?
does it have to get before you finally say, I'm willing to walk away from the Democratic Party in an election to actually vote for a better life? Because we saw in the early numbers, I was looking at this today, with the generic congressional ballot, Republicans had a lead of 2.5 going in. That's what we know for a fact. The president's approval rating down to 42.4, 54.9% disapprove, right? That's a 12.5% disapproval. Okay, that's upside down. That's you're in serious trouble if you're the president with that. And the direction of the country, I thought this was interesting. Only 23.9% of Americans said we're headed in the right direction. Makes sense. A lot of Democrats. Wrong direction, on the wrong track, 68.3%. That's a 44-point differential there. When you look at those three, that's why you were going into tonight thinking, hey, this should be a big red wave, because the American people, when they're asked about their life, they're asked about the direction of where the country's going, they're overwhelmingly, tell you the truth, but when they walked in the voting booth, they said, all right, I'm going to stick with my Democrats if I'm a Democrat, and I'm going to go with the Republicans if I'm a Republican. This is a very different America than it was 8, 10, 12 years ago in election cycles.
It is dramatically different. So I think back to the 2000 election, where states like Georgia and Arizona were reliably bright red.
Mm-hmm.
And
reliably is I mean, it was just a guarantee.
It wasn't even, they weren't even really contested. And everyone was holding their breath on Ohio and Florida. Ohio and Florida. Florida is now double-digit Republican, and Ohio's close to double digits. That's a pretty remarkable shift. And look, Kemp, they've called it 54% to 45%. So that's a pretty sizable differential for Warnock and Walker to be basically tied. That means there are a whole lot of voters that went and voted for Brian Kemp, who's a conservative Republican, and either voted for Warnock or I think more likely just didn't vote in the Senate race. I still hope and believe Walker pulls it out, but we could easily head for a runoff in that race.
You know, you always look at blunders. I did not see that many blunders from conservative candidates. I felt like conservative candidates were on message coast to coast. I felt like they understood the issue was the economy. I felt like they were listening to the voters, and I think they understood how to kind of stay hyper-focused. I feel like this wasn't a screw-up tonight in any major race by Republicans. I think there's just some people, no matter what, that are saying, I'm sticking with my party.
Yes, but I'm going to disagree with you.
Okay.
The amount which Democrats are outspending Republicans is now systemic and baked in the cake. And it is massive. And let me give you an example. Let's go back to my 2018 race. We were talking about Beto O'Rourke. All right, third quarter of 2018. I broke the fundraising record for a single quarter in a Senate race in Texas. Raised in one quarter $12 million. Broke it by several $1 million. I mean, it was a pretty big margin. Massive. That I broke it. $12 million, I felt pretty good. We'd worked really hard, raised that in one quarter. My record lasted about 2 hours until Beto announced his fundraising. What do you think Beto raised in Q3 of 2018?
I don't remember. I'm not going to guess. I know it was a lot because I remember how much of it was coming from out of state, which was shocking.
$38 million.
Wow.
The record, which I set, was 12, and 2 hours later, he more than tripled it at $38 million. What did that mean? He ended up in the entire race outraising and outspending me 3-1. That meant, let me give you a practical, what does that mean? Because I hear people all the time say, oh, money doesn't win races. Really? How many races have you run?
Yeah. No, money does win races.
And lack of money loses races. Let me tell you what that meant. In my 2018 campaign, we had a total of 19 paid full-time campaign staffers. 19. Beto had 807.
Full-time.
That's the difference. 19 versus 807 paid staff members. That differential, and we've seen this is playing out, I believe, in every Senate race in the country. We're going to have a follow-up podcast where I want to get the numbers and run through in specifics. the fundraising differential, race by race, because Republicans are allowing Democrats to massively outspend us. That is a real problem, and it's a real problem for everyone who is concerned about these wild-eyed socialists destroying the country. It's a real problem. The differential is massive, and what I'm frustrated this cycle is I think there are two races that were very winnable, three races. New Hampshire and Colorado both have been called for the Democrats, and Arizona. We'll see what happens in Arizona. I still hope Masters pulls it out, although those early numbers we saw were not great. In all three of those races, the Democrats massively outspent the Republicans, and it is a collective failure of Republicans across the board, whether Mitch McConnell, whether Donald Trump, whether all the different sources of cash didn't spend, and I'll underscore even more. The gubernatorial races, Tudor Dixon massively outspent in Michigan. Doug Mastriano in Pennsylvania so staggeringly outspent that it was ridiculous. If we care about saving the country, we need to get serious about saying, how about having a race where there's parity, where we have an equal amount of money on both sides? I mean, that would be such a radical change, and yet we're not doing it, and we're not doing it on both fronts. Number one, the left-wing gazillionaires get bigger checks, much bigger checks. You look at in 2020, biggest Republican giver in the country was Sheldon Adelson. Sheldon gave about $100 million. That same cycle, Mark Zuckerberg gave $400 million to taking over the election machinery in big blue cities all over the country. That's among the giant givers. How about the little guys? Act Blue, which is the small Democrat donors where they're giving $5, $10, $50, $100, floods cash. That's where Beto's cash came from. We don't have remotely the equivalent on the Republican side. So I don't want to say, gosh, nobody did anything wrong. We could have done better. We need to fix this problem.
We talk the right issues, but we don't have the money that they have. And I think that is certainly a problem where Republicans need to realize that Democrats, when they believe something, and I've said this about the radical left, the AOCs and the young people, they will crowdfund somebody at $5, $10, $15. We are still stuck in the Stone Ages when it comes to fundraising as a organization. I truly believe this, where it's the, hey, you got to bring people in and write the check, $1,000 dinners. We have to fix that, and it's got to be fixed soon. Otherwise, as you put it, there are races we should win that we're going to keep losing.
So look, I'll tell you why, I think. On the left, politics is life and death. It is religion.
Yeah.
It is what they live for, particularly like the Green New Deal, the climate alarmists and the extremes, the socialists. It has literally replaced faith. I think every person wants to live for something bigger than themselves. I think that's a basic human yearning. And on the left, politics is their new faith. This is what they do. On the right, listen, most people on the right are normal people, and their priorities day to day are their kids, their family, their job. Like, politics is something they do. Okay, yeah, that sure, I'd like to, but it's not. All right, I'll tell you something I say in fundraisers, and it actually, my finance team hates when I say this, but it's an interesting question for people of means. I suggest to them, I said, all right, here's a crazy concept. The amount you spend to save America should be at least equal to what you spend on art. So if you've got a $1,000 painting in your living room, okay, spend $1,000 on politics. But you know what? I've talked to a lot of gazillionaires who will give $1 million and say, that's fantastic. Look at what a hero I am. And they've got $50 million of art hanging on the wall. Or 100.
Yeah.
Or 200 million. Look, Mark Zuckerberg put 400 million. And that's not just true with the titans of the universe. The titans of the universe tend to be hardcore leftists. Almost overwhelmingly, you look at the 10 richest people on earth, they spend their money consistently left of center. But also true with people who are just successful, a car dealer, a local manufacturer, someone who's done well, who on the Republican side, they feel damn skippy proud if they gave $2,900. Look at that.
Yeah.
Isn't that special? And it's like, okay, look, we are
Do you want to win or do you want to lose?
We're losing our nation. And on our side, we need the same urgency. This is where I'm spoiled. You know my dad.
Yeah.
When you're raised in a Cuban household, there's an urgency to politics. It's not, oh, that's interesting. I'm looking at these numbers on the screen, and I'm wondering, does the greatest nation in the history of the world survive or does it perish? That matters. That matters to me. It matters to my kids. And it's, growing up, my dad all the time would say, look, having principled men and women in office is how you save yourself from tyranny. That's what the stakes are. And so I do think I'm glad of the election. I'm glad we're going to retake the House. I still think we'll retake the Senate. But if we really believe what we're saying, then we need a rededication that this matters.
Yeah.
I mean, as you know, I spent the last month on a nationwide 17-state bus tour.
And I want to paint a picture so people understand this. Most politicians, when they're not up for an election year, they might get involved in one or two races. They have a friend or a buddy or somebody they want to kind of help out. You didn't just go out and support people. You found candidates to run in races where traditional Republicans would have said, let that one go. That's a Democratic district. You did this on the border. It was incredible. I went out there on the road with you a few days. I was exhausted, and you did 10 times X what I was involved in. And that's what we need, I think, more from the Republican leadership as well, and more Republicans out there. They need to be finding candidates. They need to be funding those candidates. They need to be doing exactly what you just did with the bus tour, but it needs to be happening all over the country and state by state. They need to be doing the same thing. Otherwise, as you put it, Democrats are going to keep winning.
Look, I raised about $4 million for candidates for the Senate, candidates for the House. The two biggest pots of money on the Republican side are Mitch McConnell, who has a super PAC that spends over $300 million in Senate races, and then Donald Trump, who has over $100 million in his PAC. Both of those decided to spend very little in states like New Hampshire, Arizona, Colorado. They effectively ceded those. I think that was a mistake. And I will say, listen, on the bus tour, I mean, you want to talk about the personal cost. You know Heidi.
Yeah.
I've been doing politics now a decade. She lit into me towards the end of that bus tour at a level I've never seen because I had not been home in a long time. I was on the road doing a rally in Florida with Corey Mills and Scotty Moore. Corey won tonight. Scotty lost. I missed my daughter Catherine's 12th birthday because I was out doing a rally to save this country. Now, that hurts. I hate missing my daughter's birthday. I didn't take her to one of the World Series games, which I had planned to, because I was out campaigning to try to help other candidates retake the House and Senate. I did thankfully get to take her to Game 6 of the World Series where we won. But, that's when you're gone for a month. Look, it has a price with your family. I'm grateful if and when we get there, but I'll say this, when we get there, we need to use the majority. We need to do something with it. We can't just be, once we have these majorities, Republican leadership is immediately going to start naysaying, oh, we can't do anything about it. And one of the things in the next podcast coming up. This podcast comes out 3 times a week. It comes out Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
And for people watching, make sure you download the podcast. Wherever you get your podcasts, download it, hit that subscribe, auto-download. A lot of people watch this video, and they think that's it. No, you can listen to the other 2 that are audio only. We do 1 that's video a week. We do the other 2 that are audio only, so that's why it's so important people grab the podcast, listen, and download them, because you won't. Otherwise, if you don't listen, you don't get those other 2.
And this podcast, we've had over 50 million downloads. We've been the #1 ranked podcast in the world. Every week we beat CNN's morning show. And what this podcast is designed to do is to tell you the facts that the corrupt corporate media won't. And that includes the good facts, but it also includes like calling out, okay, we need to be doing more. We screwed up here. This was a mistake here. Here's what's really going on. Here's what the stakes are. I mean, it includes being honest and bringing people behind the scenes, behind the curtain. This podcast is all about equipping you. Listen, the right political answer for me. This is clearly the, okay, read political talking points here, is for me to be peppy. Go team, yay, we've won. And I'm glad we're going to get majorities.
Sean Patrick, by the way, is losing right now. Just got word.
Good.
With 95% in, so that's a big deal. That's one of those little caveats that I think tells you like some good stuff's happening.
But I'm going to say right now the majority should have been bigger. And I think we need to have some real questions about what mistakes were done on the Republican side that didn't get it as a bigger majority, and that includes the fundraising components of it. It includes divisions. Anytime you have the party, if you have a civil war in the party, look, Colorado was lost when the Republican nominee got in a pissing match with Donald Trump.
Yeah, it was a dumb move.
It was a dumb move, and it lost the race. Every time you have a civil war in the party, we elect Democrats. So, if you think, hey, sounds like a great move. By the way, there are a bunch of gubernatorial nominees in states like Pennsylvania, in states like Maryland, in states like Massachusetts. And by the way, Maryland and Massachusetts both have Republican governors right now. All 3 of them are fixing to have Democrats.
Yeah.
All 3 of them were winnable, and we nominated candidates who spent almost zero. That's malpractice.
Yeah.
Like, you think it's going to matter who runs the elections in Pennsylvania in 2024? Like, show me what map are we not waiting on pins and needles for what happens in Pennsylvania? And guess what? We've now got hyper-partisan Democrat Attorney General Josh Shapiro as the governor, who's going to have his thumb and his foot and his rear end on the scale to elect Democrats. And it was idiotic to allow the state of affairs that the Republican nominees in those states, there was a whole period of time where they ran no TV ads. And by the way, I listened to some of them saying, well, we don't need advertising. We just, the grassroots, I had 3 people at a rally tell me I was right, so that's enough to win.
It's not.
I'm sorry. This is not a game.
Yeah.
This is real. This is life and death, and it takes, like, marshaling the resources and team and organization to win. There's a reason in Missouri I went early on and endorsed Eric Schmidt. Why? Because there was one Republican nominee, Eric Greitens, who if he'd gotten the nominee, we could have lost that seat. I mean, Eric Greitens resigned in scandal, a whole series of scandals, one in which involved having a woman who was not his wife, hairdresser, tied up in the basement of his house, naked, where he took pictures of her and allegedly blackmailed her with those pictures. Now, as I've said, slightly tongue-in-cheek, but not really, look, as Republicans, we don't need to have insanely high standards for our candidates. They don't need to be Nobel laureates. They don't need to have cured cancer. But is it too much to ask that they not have tied a woman up in their friggin' basement?
Yeah.
Like, really?
Like, we can do better than that.
Like, do you want to take a red state and forfeit it? And so I went in, and it helps that Eric Schmidt is, I think, by far the best candidate, and he was the attorney general. He's a strong conservative, so I could endorse him. And by the way, when I endorsed him, I didn't piss on Greitens at all. In fact, I didn't say, I had no criticism for him. I just said, I'm here for Schmidt. But it was obvious, if we want to win, let's support the strongest conservative who can win. I do think we need to have some serious assessment about what does it take to win, and win means getting your guy elected and sworn into office, because it's
vitally important. Let's do a reset here so people know where we are right now. I want to put up some graphics. If you are watching us right now, make sure you hit that share button on Facebook, on Twitter, wherever, YouTube. Make sure you share this so that other people can join in with us now. So hit that share or forward it to your family, your friends right now. Let's look at where we are in the midterms. So Democrats in the House right now, they are 116 seats. Democrats, Republicans, 170. You need 218 needed for the majority there. I like where we stand at this moment in time. This is obviously a good thing. The Senate is obviously much more concerning. Democrats have 45. Republicans have 45. I don't like that. That's a number I just don't like right now. That means there's still right now 10 seats up for grabs. And again, as you put it earlier, we were hoping for better news at this point. We're going to get the House. I think we should enjoy that moment. We're getting rid of Nancy Pelosi. She will retire, I believe. There's a lot of these close races, as you said. Clearly, money mattered more than people wanted to admit. And fundraising is something you take away from this. But what does this say about going into
let me tell you one of the reasons money matters, because it matters. Number one, there's a massive differential, but it matters even more than that, because today, the corporate media is more corrupt than it's ever been. Listen, 5 years ago, the corporate media, there were people there that pretended to be journalists. CNN pretended to be journalists. They tried to be journalists. They claimed they wanted to be journalists. They were bad at it. They leaned left. But they would end up, I used to go on CNN once a week. I would regularly go on CNN. And they did ostensibly claim to believe the value of being fair and balanced, and so they'd present someone from both sides. And so now they would be completely biased when they questioned you, but they'd try to at least have some modicum of discussion.
Voice from both sides.
How many years did you work at CNN?
7 years. I did 7 years in hell, yes.
And they are a shattered husk of who they are, because they don't pretend to be journalists. They are propagandists. They view themselves as propagandists. They're liars. And my point here is that's actually why the money differential is even more damaging, because the Democrats, the ones who are winning, they win these races, half of them because they hide in their basement, they refuse to debate, and they know the corrupt corporate media will be a multi-billion-dollar super PAC carrying their message every day. And part of the reason, so look, we were talking about the kind of tribalism, the red America, blue America. If you are a left-leaning voter, if you get all your news from CNN or MSNBC or even ABC, CBS, NBC, you are being lied to all day long. And it really is to Americans. You take something like the southern border crisis. Many of those folks have no idea it's happening. They don't believe it's happening. They think the crisis is that 50 people were sent to Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah.
Because they have utterly no idea what is happening. And so that combination, not only the money differential, but the corporate media world has gotten so profoundly corrupt that combination is insanely problematic.
Democrats, by the way, and Republicans both just had two races called, one for Republicans, one for the Democrats in the Senate. So now we're at 46-46. I want to go through a couple of these real quick, what we have in these numbers.
Yep.
And these are my key races. We don't have anything yet in the Senate. In Alaska, no numbers have come in there. In that one, we're waiting. Those polls actually close at 1 a.m. Eastern, 12 Central. Arizona, Mark Kelly, 57%, Blake Masters, 39%, with 48% reporting. Colorado, as you know there, that's just, a Democrat. They're saying it's been called for him, up over, 55 to 41. Joe, O'Day against Michael Bennet, the Democrat there. You look at Connecticut, Richard Blumenthal there, 54-45 over.
Oh, good. They just called Ted Budd.
Yeah,
so
Ted
that's
Budd,
good. North Carolina.
North Carolina, that's
an
going to be a big
important
one.
victory.
And that may be one of those that helps save us, so we get that 51, maybe 52.
Now, to be clear, that's defense. So that seat was a Republican seat. Richard Burr, who's retiring. So even though it's a purple state, we have 2 Republicans representing it. So we held on there, but that doesn't change the balance of power. If we'd lost it, it would have changed the balance of power. But that's an important
nice
victory because that was close.
Us.
That's a 4-point race.
Yeah, and then you've got the one that I think we're looking at right now is Herschel Walker and Raphael Warnock. You've got 49.10 for Herschel Walker right now with 97% reporting, 48.87 for Raphael Warnock. That means with 88% reporting, it's going to be very hard for someone to get above 50% there, which means we're going into a runoff in Georgia. How much money is going to need to be raised? You talked about money there. This is going to be a money game going into that one.
So listen, it will vary, and it will depend where we are. If Republicans are already at 51, so if we hold Pennsylvania and we win Nevada, the spending in Georgia will be significant, but not as much, because if we
it won't be control for the Senate.
It won't be control of the Senate. So if we're already at 51, it'll be an expensive race, but it won't be Armageddon. If it is, as it was before, control of the Senate, if it is determining whether it's 50 or 51, you will see at least $100 million spent in a month in Georgia, and you could see $200 million, $250 million. They spent $300 million, both sides altogether, in the last runoff in Georgia. Now, that was 2 races, but we're talking about at least $100 million spent in a month if it's controlled of the Senate, and potentially significantly more than that.
You mentioned Pennsylvania. Let me give the latest updated numbers. 79% in reporting right now. John Fetterman is at 49.49 to Oz at 48.11. You go back to tribalism, what you said earlier. I don't know how anyone could have looked at John Fetterman and said he can represent me well in Congress. He can do a good job in Congress. There were so many examples. Would you hire him to cut your grass? Would you hire him to fly your plane? Would you hire him to be your Uber or Lyft driver? Would you hire him for any basic job? And it's not about being mean. It's just being obvious that there was the medical thing that happened. It's having an impact on his life. And yet he's winning right now in that race when everybody knows that was voting in that race that he's not capable of doing the job, but I guess it's about overall the majority, right? It's who cares if he goes there and he can't do the job, at least he's in the Democratic Party, and that'll be enough.
It's I think the team jersey. And there are Democrats in Pennsylvania that are happy to put the team jersey on. Look, Fetterman, his significant impairment is concerning. I'm more concerned that the guy is a radical. I am not remotely, if he wins, I'm not remotely excited about serving with the guy. I think he is right there with Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, that we're electing, if he gets elected, another socialist to Congress, another person on the extreme left, which will radicalize the Democrats even more. His record on crime is abysmal. I mean, he was on the parole board in Pennsylvania, and over again, he voted to release the murderer. He said we should release 1/3 of the prisoners in Pennsylvania, just let them out of jail. And
he was proud to let out convicted murderers and said we should do it more often.
That is, I genuinely don't get the mindset that says this is a good idea.
Let's go back to Arizona for a second, and I want to, if we have the numbers, I want to put that up there if we can, guys. If you've got Arizona, because Arizona, I think, is really kind of shocking to me tonight. I thought Arizona with Mark Kelly and Blake Masters, there was going to be a little bit different. You've got Kelly with 57%. You got Masters at 39%. You look at the governor's race there, and you had a dynamic candidate, a rock star. And there's always rock stars that come out of elections. But I am shocked to see how the governor's race really did not impact as much. It's much tighter in that race. And on the Senate side of things, are you as surprised as I am on that one?
Well, there is often a differential between governor and senator. And we've seen, actually, blue states that are willing to elect Republican governors. The incumbent governor of Massachusetts is a Republican. The incumbent governor of Maryland is a Republican. Until recently, the governor of Illinois was a Republican. I mean, blue states have elected Republicans. Some of it is that people are looking for someone to take care of problems at home and to run things, and they, in a governor's race, they can be less partisan. They can put less of their team jersey on. And
look, we're getting these Kari Lake numbers are up there. Actually, they're starting to at least mimic 47% reporting right now. Katie Hobbs at 55.67. Kari Lake is at 43.33. Well, again, with 47% in. This is actually mirroring the Senate race more than I would like to talk about.
Yep.
Now, granted, we've had some voter issues out there today. We've seen all that come out. The machine's not working. Maybe there's something out there that makes these things get a lot closer. But even in the other, look at the Arizona Senate race. Mark Kelly there, that's a pretty substantial number, a lead to come back for with half the votes in so far.
Well, and the massive amount of money Mark Kelly had.
He's a darling of donors. People need to understand that. Democratic donors absolutely love his name. They love the face. They love what he talks about.
Well, he runs as a Republican. And he votes like Chuck Schumer. The disconnect between who he is in Washington and who he is in Arizona is massive. Look, Raphael Warnock was running an ad about passing legislation with me. This was one of his closing ads, that I teamed up with Ted Cruz to pass legislation to create a new highway that runs from Texas all the way through the southeast of the United States, all the way to Georgia. And it's true, that bill was the Cruz-Warnock bill. I wrote it. I sought out him to join me, to have it as a bipartisan bill, and we passed it through the Senate and passed it into law. It's a big deal for jobs in Texas. It's a big deal for jobs in Georgia. But it says something that a guy who votes consistently on the extreme left of the Senate, he's not bragging about that. He's bragging about, I worked with Cruz. That's what his ads are. Mark Kelly's ads were, I fight to secure the border.
Which he's not done. It's a lie.
Well, and the willingness of Democrats to lie. Joe Biden said recently, when he became president, gas was $5 a gallon. Gas was less than half of that.
Yeah. Where were the fact checkers, right?
It was $2.38 a gallon. And he just flat out lied. And he said, well, look, I've dropped it because it was $5 a gallon when I got elected. No, it wasn't. But they know the corporate media won't call them out. They can lie because there's no downside to lying.
Let's take a step back, look at tonight in general from the standpoint of, okay, was this a success? It wasn't as big as we wanted. The House is going to be substantial. That's the good news. They're going to get to look into Joe Biden. They're going to get to look into Burisma. They're going to get to look into Russia and all the money from China. The Hunter Biden laptop is now going to become real. There's going to be real investigations there. I think that's going to be something that Republicans are going to want to happen immediately. I think voters care about that on the Republican side. It's going to be very interesting to see how deep they go with subpoena power there. The question is, how do we do that the right way without screwing it up? And I think you understand what I mean by that, where it becomes just, this, oh, it's partisan, don't pay attention, don't watch it, don't worry about it. Republicans have to be careful here. They talk about the issues that they were sent there to do. That's the economy, obviously. But there's also these investigations that I do believe are important. What's your advice to the House members that are just getting elected tonight?
Look, the investigations are important, but the oversight needs to focus on the issues that matter to the American people, that matter to people at home, that are kitchen table issues. So if we are looking backwards, if we are trying to go after Democrats that we hate, I think that there is a component of that, but it needs to focus on how did this impact the American people. So Anthony Fauci, I'm not a fan of Fauci, to put it mildly. But it is important when examining Fauci not just to go after him because it's this jihad to go after him. It's important to do so to examine the policies he put in place that hurt millions of Americans, the policies he put in place that resulted in school closures across this country that damaged tens of millions of kids across this country, the policies he put in place that very probably funded gain-of-function research in the Wuhan Institute for Virology that caused this pandemic to begin with. Those are relevant because they're relevant to the folks back home, to the folks living their lives. My advice for Republicans in the House and the Senate is focus on the issues that make a difference in people's lives.
Stick to that. Don't screw that up, and you're going to be okay. Let's talk about the Senate. What is your goal if we get the majority? What should people be focusing on? And the new senators coming in, what is your advice to them about what should happen right away?
So, look, I think oversight's very important, and I think using oversight to examine the policies put in place by the Biden administration that have hurt Americans, whether that is the policies on spending and debt and printing money that have produced rampant inflation, whether it is the radical Green New Deal's policies that have driven gasoline through the roof. And by the way, gasoline's going up, and it's going up by a lot more. The Democrats managed
to... Oil reserves are just going to now stop being at 2 million barrels a day.
Right.
That's ending. Welcome to election night politics. And you're going to see some people are saying it could be unleaded, that could be easily $5 a gallon by the end of the year, and that we could see diesel prices up in the $8, $9 range.
Biden and the Democrats bought the prices of gas temporarily down a little bit. And I'll say, looking at some of these election results, their view was they could fool the American people. And at least in some places, that may have proven correct. I had hoped that was too cynical for their own good. I think we need, for example, I'm next in line to chair the Commerce Committee in the Senate. You can expect hearings examining the impact between policies this administration has put in place and the gas prices people are paying at home, the impact between the prices you're paying at home for just about everything, laying that out. On the southern border, I talked about how the corrupt corporate media doesn't tell. If you watch Fox News, if you watch Newsmax, you know what's happening. If you watch Verdict, you really know what's happening. But if you watch CNN, you not only don't know what's happening, you know the opposite of what's happening. You know a propaganda story that is distorted 180 degrees opposite of what's happening. On the chaos at our southern border, we need to tell that story. So one of the very first priorities I think the House should do is to impeach Alejandro Mayorkas. Alejandro Mayorkas, as you know, the Secretary of Homeland Security. Why should we do that? You might say, well, wait, what's the end point? What is success? Well, to impeach someone takes a majority in the House. I think we're going to have a majority in the House. I think we'll have the votes to impeach Mayorkas. To convict Mayorkas takes 2/3 of the Senate. The chances of that happening are essentially zero. These partisan Democrats are not going to vote to impeach him. They don't care. If Kelly wins, the guy who's been running ads saying he's fighting to secure the border, I'll wager you $100 right now that Mark Kelly will vote against convicting Alejandro Mayorkas because he supports the open borders. He's just lying to the voters of Arizona. So why should we do it? We should do it because we should have a trial on the floor of the Senate, an extended trial on the floor of the Senate, that puts the facts before the American people, that puts the facts of 4.7 million people, that puts the children sexually assaulted, that puts the women brutally raped, that puts the dead bodies, the people abandoned to die in the brutal heat by the human traffickers, that tells the story for the people who are being lied to. I think that needs to be an early priority. I think we also need to pass positive pro-growth, pro-jobs legislation, cutting taxes, reducing regulations, and force the Democrats either to filibuster it in the Senate or Biden to veto it.
Right now, we have 7 Senate seats left in play. There's 128 House seats left in play.
And I saw they just called Washington State, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that's going to hurt. That's going to hurt for us. You look at Walker, you look at Warnock, this race. I think we're headed to a runoff there. It looks pretty clear with 72% in. They're exactly tied, dead even at 49-49 right now. Very hard for someone to get to 50+1 with 72% in based on what we're seeing right now. That could change, but I mean, literally, they're 400 votes apart right now. You can't make differential, of 335 votes. That's how tight that race is. No one would have thought that was going to happen tonight there. And I think you also have one other issue that's going to be interesting tonight as we walk away from this. You look at Garcia. Let's talk about this race real quick in Texas in the House. Garcia there down. De La Cruz winning. That's over the Democrat there with 70%
De La Cruz is a good victory.
That's one of yours. That's something you're going to love. Flores is down to Gonzalez, the Democrat there with 73% in, Texas 34. These are some of those important races that border was an issue. Border security was an issue. Going back to what you just said about Mayorkas, you got to look at what is going to happen and what this means for the presidential and what this means for candidates looking at it. What is your takeaway now for what this next presidential election is going to be about?
Well, I think it's going to be a shirts and skins endeavor. I think it's going to be one tribe versus the other. And, you know, I will say the results they just put on from South Texas. As you know, I had campaigned hard in South Texas. I believe South Texas was going to turn red. It has turned somewhat red, but not fully red. So Monica De La Cruz won. That's a good victory. That's an important victory. That is a seat that has been Democrat for over 100 years.
You look at this Garcia race, the Texas 28 that's up that we just had. I still think she's got a bright future. I think she's a rock star. And De La Cruz, I think that this is a momentum gain for us. Even if we didn't win all of them, I still think this was a big victory showing that the border issue is a real issue if you tell the story.
So it's been over 100 years since the district Monica De La Cruz just won. Had a Republican, she just won. The other two districts, Cassie Garcia. Cassie spent 7, almost 8 years on my staff. She was my South Texas director. She was my deputy state director. She's terrific. I thought she was going to win. I will say Henry Cuellar is a tough candidate. He is the best of the Texas Democrats. He is the least crazy. And he's got a deep base of support in Laredo. That district runs from Laredo all the way up to the outskirts of San Antonio. By the way, they just called Utah Mike Lee against McMullen, 54-42. That's really good. That's a 12-point victory. That was a 3-point race a month ago, and it was based on Democrat lies and deceptions.
And Mitt Romney really quietly working against Lee. A lot of people out there were very shocked that he was doing that quietly behind the scenes.
And I will say, look, this goes back to my thesis that it's all tribalism. That Utah was at risk until people kind of came home and they put on their jerseys and said, okay, I'm voting for the R. Like that, when all was said and done, that's what played out. I leaned in hard to help Mike. That's good, but at this point, we're looking at Pennsylvania, we're looking at Georgia, we're looking at Arizona.
Nevada and Arizona.
And Nevada.
in Nevada. That's it. I think what we should do, we're obviously live now. We should do a quick reset for the podcast tomorrow morning for people that have missed this. If you are watching this now, hit that share button with all your family and friends so they can join us live as we do that. And to my production team in the background, if you guys want to go ahead and we'll do a reset here for the podcast for tomorrow morning for people that miss us. Plus, I think it's time for us to kind of maybe crack open a drink here. It's only appropriate, Senator, that we have a White Claw. I'm not going to throw it at you, right? I mean, this is a way to have a sponsored by White Claw tonight, right? I got your
they're
mango.
not a sponsor of the podcast. Maybe they should be.
Maybe
we're giving them some free advertising.
Cheers to this.
Cheers.
And for people, before we get into the podcast for in the morning, can we talk a little bit about these two that were thrown? So a lot of you didn't realize there was two White Claws. That's why we have two tonight that were thrown at you. So
mango White Claw. You were actually in charge of getting it.
Yeah,
Look at that.
I got you
Very
mango.
fruity.
I thought you'd like it, a little beach flair
like
here.
Cuban. I like a little bit of tropical flavor to things.
It's actually not that bad. This
is actually the first time in my life I've ever had a White Claw.
You and me both, by the way. You and me both. This is just you and me both. We can savor this moment. I'll put this on the wall in the studio as a picture that I will never forget. You're at the parade for the Astros World Series victory. And walk us through, because I only saw the one. I did not realize until I talked to you that there was two of these chunked at you.
So, look, the parade was yesterday because the Astros won the World Series, and it was awesome and spectacular. As I mentioned, Catherine and I were there at Game 6 for the victory. I rode in the parade in 2017 when we won the World Series in 2017. It was awesome. Over 1 million people came out. It was right after Hurricane Harvey, so it was a great thing for the city of Houston after that crushing disaster to have a victory to bring us together. This victory helped. Look, I mean, it as a Houstonian, the whole trash can banging scandal has been thoroughly unfun, and no Houstonian likes it. And look, it's a blemish on the 2017 victory. It's not a good thing, and 2022 was a nice victory to be like, damn it, this is one hell of a ball club, and they did it again, and give them their due. So riding in the parade. Now, I will say it was interesting. 2017, when we won it, it wasn't an election year. And the tribalism was less intense.
It was more of a party and a celebration.
It was a party and a celebration. The parade this time was the day before Election Day. And the two sides are dug in. And look, Texas is a red state, but the Democrats here are really pissed off. And there were a bunch of people wearing or carrying rainbow flag Beto signs. There were Beto signs everywhere. I think almost every Beto supporter came out to the parade. Like it was, his people were passionate. And there were a bunch of people who were yelling and cursing at me. Now, there were also a ton of people who were cheering and giving me thumbs up. And the press being the press, they covered all the people elevating. They didn't cover the people giving thumbs up, but they covered if it was another finger, that made it on the news. And listen, this is a tribalized world. So if you're on the D side of things, you lifted one finger. And if you're on the R side of things, you lifted another finger. But one guy we passed did more than that. And we're coming by, and he threw not one, but two cans of White Claw at me. Both full, both unopened. The first one he threw missed and landed in the vehicle we were riding. The second one he threw came right at me, and thankfully I was able to block it. I had I guess decent reflexes, and so knocked it down with my arm. So it didn't peg me. It was headed kind of, I don't know, somewhere head torso region, and I knocked it down. I wasn't hurt. A lot of people asked, hey, were you hurt? I was not hurt, thankfully. And listen, I mean, a full can.
Dude, a full can, if you don't see it coming, can do some serious damage. It's not a joke. I mean, yeah, it obviously went viral, and there were people going, oh, I wish he would have thrown it harder, and but it was definitely chunked at you to hurt you.
Now, I will say that a shout out to Houston Police and to Capitol Police. Capitol Police was with me on the parade. The guy right there, as soon as he threw them, he started like taking off. I mean, he realized, oh crap, this may not have been the best idea, and he started taking off. And actually, the police apprehended him immediately. Like it was, I talked to the police chief yesterday, and he said, "Oh yeah, we had a lot of cops there." And I said, "Look, that stops idiots from doing stupid things." And there was a big police presence there, so they arrested him. I put out a statement yesterday saying, as always, I want to thank the Capitol Police and thank Houston Police for their quick response and the great work they do. I'm just grateful that the clown who threw his White Claw at me had a noodle for an arm. I mean, listen, if he threw a 100-mile-an-hour fastball, I might be, in very different conditions.
We may not be doing Verdict Live tonight, right?
So I will say perhaps the most damning thing in Texas to say is that he threw a White Claw. I was sort of wondering if Bartles and James was coming after that.
I think it was pretty appropriate that a liberal was throwing a White Claw. Like, it was exactly what I would expect, right? It's exactly what I would expect a liberal to throw at you, I'm not going to lie.
And by the way, some of the Twitter commentary is like, oh, no. He was tossing you a beer to drink. No,
he was not.
That's not. By the way, I will say, so I was riding in the vehicle with two other members of Congress, both Democrats, Lizzie Fletcher and Sylvia Garcia, and Lizzie had an orange thrown at her, which landed in the vehicle. No one covered that. I told her, hey, you ought to keep that orange. That's an interesting bit of. So I will say both my daughters were on the parade with me. And I really didn't like someone throwing a full can with my girl standing right next to me. I mean, that could have hit one of the girls and done real harm. But again, the guy, couldn't throw very hard. I'm glad Catherine, my 12-year-old, who's a softball player, I'm glad she wasn't throwing it because she would have put a lot more heat on it than that fella did.
I love it. He has been arrested. He's probably sitting there trying to figure out which lawyer he's going to get to represent him. So it had a happy ending, but in honor of that moment there. Let's do a reset for the podcast in the morning. Everybody that's watching live, obviously this is live, but we're going to do a recap for everybody in the morning. And if you guys are ready, you want me to just do a quick countdown? This is when I love live because we're literally, we're live. So we'll do a little quick countdown and we'll start our podcast for in the morning for everyone that missed us tonight. Hit that share button right now, by the way, if you are watching this live. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. Senator, it is right now 11:30 at night. For everyone that's listening this morning, we have been doing a live verdict before this. I want to do a recap. I think it's pretty clear now that if we were going to be waiting up for an official result in a lot of these races, we would not get any sleep at all. Let's kind of recap where we are at this moment. I think you would agree with me that is the highlight of the night is we're taking back the House. The concerning moment of the night is the Senate is still very much it's even at this point, and that concerns all of us. This was a map that was designed in this midterm for Democrats. They had the advantage. There's a lot of tribalism in this country. We can see now. Shocking that Fetterman is still in this one. Shocking what we're seeing in Arizona right now. But let's focus on the one exciting point in the House races. We are going to have a substantial red wave in the House. That means Nancy Pelosi is going to retire, and we won't have to deal with her anymore. But we're also going to have subpoena power in the House to get some stuff done that needs to be looked at.
Well, I think that's right. I think it is a good election tonight, but I also think it could have been much better. So it is a red wave, but it's not as big a wave as it should have been. Frankly, given the disaster from the Democrats, this should have been a massive red wave, and we're going to take the House, but at this point it's not clear how big a majority. I had hoped it would be a 40-50 vote majority. I think it will be substantially smaller than that. We are losing a number of close House races that were winnable that we didn't win.
The Republicans at this moment have 175 seats. Democrats are 138 in the House. There's 121 at 11:31 at night Central Time that are still out there. And again, we're going to win back the House. That's going to be great. You look at the Senate right now, and this is the part that is very concerning. It's 47-47 as we speak. We're headed for probably a runoff in Georgia. For people that don't understand this, if you don't get above 50%.
Right now in Pennsylvania, Fetterman has a 40,000 vote lead with 82% in.
And that's concerning.
That is very concerning.
What does that tell you about the mistake that was made with and I say mistake because I think Oz was the easier candidate to beat, in my opinion, in the general.
Look, I went all in for Dave McCormick in the primary. I leaned in vigorously. Part of the reason I went all in is I thought he was the strongest conservative who could win. I think if McCormick had been the nominee, he would have won decisively. I hope Oz wins. As we're sitting here late at night, I supported Oz once he was the nominee. I wanted him to win. I think Fetterman is a spectacularly bad candidate. He's radical. He's extreme. He's on the bleeding left. He's going to join, if he becomes the senator, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders in the cuckoo caucus of the Democrat Party. That is not good. That's not, I think, where a lot of Pennsylvanians are, but there were.
What is the takeaway? That a guy that has clearly cognitive issues, has had this stroke, I hate that for him sincerely, but can't even get through debates, says goodnight at the beginning of the debate, cannot understand questions, basic questions. This is a guy you wouldn't want to be the pilot of your plane or your Uber driver. You probably wouldn't hire him for a lot of jobs right now. It's because of the medical issues. And yet he's leading, as we speak at 11:33 at night, in a race that is so important that could really deal with who's in charge of the Senate.
Look, the 2,386,595 people who, as of now, have voted for Fetterman, they only care about one vote he casts, and that's for Chuck Schumer. They don't care that he can spell his name. They don't care that he knows what's going on. They want him to vote for Chuck Schumer because we are so deeply divided and tribalized. That's their team. For the same reason that there were no Philadelphia residents rooting for the Houston Astros. Why? Because their team is the Phillies. Of course, that it's not complicated. If you're a Philly guy, you root for the Phillies. Across the country, and this is true on both sides, this is true red and blue, where people right now put on their jersey and they're not focused on. If you could pull those Democrat voters, I'd love to see a room attended to those Democrat voters and be like, okay, do you agree with Fetterman voting over and over and over again to release murderers? Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
Do you agree with Fetterman saying we should release 1/3 of the criminals in prison in Pennsylvania? Do you agree with that? Like, his positions have been radical, and yet, at least in this election, and we've been moving more and more in that path, radical or not, and by the way, I think many, if not most of those Democrats who voted for him don't actually agree with those views, but they don't really know about them. The corporate media doesn't cover them, and their view is just, I'm on Team Democrat.
Yeah.
So I vote Democrat, and that's where we are. If you're going to win, you've got to make the election about issues and not personalities. And by the way, this is a broader point. I think too many of these Republican races became personality battles. When you have first-time candidates who've never run, who are celebrities, or, coming from outside, they have no record, they have no voting record, they've not been involved in issues, they've never taken a stand on anything, they frequently make major mistakes. And, experience matters.
Yeah.
Like, actually knowing what you're doing matters. Listen, you were a serious competitive tennis player. You played at Ole Miss, you know, if I wandered out on the tennis court for a competitive Division I game, I'd get crushed. And it doesn't matter that on my iPhone I have a tennis game that if I flick my finger, I have a wicked backhand on my iPhone. But it actually, experience does matter, and practice does matter, and spending, you know, when you were 7 years old, you were going to tennis camp and practicing and, you know, hitting a backhand over and over and over and over again so that it became routine. If you look at some of these races with first-time candidates, what they became was personality battles. The single best political advice I've ever gotten came from Heidi, and it came years ago, right when I was getting started. And she said, remember, it's not about you. It's about them. It's about their lives. It's about their kids. It's about their family. It's about their future. You can tell a bad candidate if they stand up there and say over and over again the word I. You know, I remember back in 2008, the Iowa caucuses, Hillary Clinton was supposed to have a coronation. And this unknown senator from Illinois stuns the world by beating her. And I'm watching the TV speeches that night. And Hillary Clinton gets up, and her concession speech, such as it was, every third word was I. And over her right shoulder, Bill Clinton was standing, the best natural politician of his generation. And you could see Bill Clinton physically wince. It was like he was being punched.
I remember watching it. It was the difference between Hillary and Bill Clinton was just night and day. It's like, how did he not coach her more?
He was in agony. I mean, he was in actual pain. Every time she said I, you could see the pain in his eyes. You cut to Barack Obama, and his speech that night, every third word was we. And watching that, my reaction is that guy's going to win. And I will say, in too many of these races, it became about the personality and not about the issues that impact the kitchen table, the kids, the family, the safety, the security, that impact the people. That's what we need to make races about.
There's some good news tonight. One of your dear friends, one of your closest friends in the Senate, we were concerned about this race, talked about it on this show. You went out there for Mike Lee. That race has now been called for Mike Lee. You got to be happy about that personally.
Look, I'm very happy. If Mike Lee had lost tonight, it would have been cataclysmic. I literally would have been in tears if Mike Lee had lost. He is by far my closest friend in the Senate. He is a smart, principled conservative. He's also the single most frequent guest on Verdict. I think Mike has been 3 times on Verdict. There's no other person that has been that many times on Verdict. His race was close. Public polling had it 3 points. At one point, it had him down. He ended up winning by, as of tonight, 12 points. He ended up winning pretty decisively. And I think what happened was Republicans came home. That even the sort of... So the reason he was in danger is all the Ds were voting for McMullen, and the sort of wobbly Rs who want to be nice and aren't sure and think Mike is really conservative, they were flirting with McMullen. And I think the tribalism prevailed, and they said, okay, I'm not voting for the guy the Democrats support. I'm coming home. I'm glad of it there. I'm not glad of it in the New York gubernatorial race. I wish Lee Zeldin had won.
He ran an amazing campaign, by the way, with not near the resources that the Democrats had. You and I talked about this on the live portion earlier, and I think it's important to recap. If there's any big takeaway from these midterm elections is that Democrats are doing a hell of a lot better job of fundraising and funding their candidates. Republicans are holding back great candidates by not raising as much money as we need to be competitive and win some of these races. And that may be one of the biggest takeaways from these midterms is it is time for Republicans to go out there and to get in this game and write more checks and to give more money to candidates, because Democrats are doing an amazing job of that, and Republicans are letting too many candidates kind of hang out to dry for too long before at the last minute they go, all right, let's give a little extra cash last year. Well, the damage was already done. Democrats are far better at fundraising nationwide than we are. We should learn from this now, getting ready for the presidential and the big election 2024.
Look, we also need Republicans to step up and answer the call, and we need serious candidates with experience. You look at the best candidates this cycle. Adam Laxalt in Nevada, who I backed early. Adam was the attorney general in Nevada. He ran for governor, did not win governor, but he's smart, experienced, talented. He has a record. He ran a disciplined campaign. Sitting here tonight, we don't know if he'll win or lose, but he was the best candidate to win in Nevada. If Adam doesn't win in Nevada, nobody could have won. And he was by far the best candidate to win in Nevada. Another one of the really good candidates this cycle was Eric Schmidt in Missouri. Same thing. He was the attorney general in Missouri, smart, disciplined, had been on the ballot, had a very conservative record, knew the pitfalls, knew the questions, that knew the ways you can step on a landmine and blow up. If the Democrats keep control of the Senate, which is entirely possible as we sit here tonight, I don't think it'll happen, but it's possible. You know, one person who could have altered that single-handedly is Chris Sununu, the governor of New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Chris Sununu, a very popular governor. If he had run for Senate, he would have won. And he made the decision, I like being governor. It's a better job. You know my reaction? So what? It's a better job. That's good for you. How about for the country? How about for the 300 million people that are getting screwed by these left-wing socialists? Look, Arizona, right now, I hope we pull out Arizona.
Yeah, let's talk about Arizona, because Arizona is one that you and I talked about a lot. You've been out there. This was a race that was obviously personality-driven, to go back to that theme for a moment. And what we're seeing in Arizona is not what we wanted to see, at least at this point tonight, as we are recording this at 11:43 in the evening.
And I will say, if you followed traditional standards for how you win Arizona, the obvious candidate to run was Doug Ducey, the incumbent Republican governor, relatively popular in the state. If you're talking about who could beat an incumbent Democrat with a ton of money, Ducey was the obvious choice. So why did Ducey not run? Ducey didn't run because Donald Trump hates him. And if Ducey had run, Trump would have carpet bombed him into oblivion. They would have had a civil war and we would have lost. So as a result, Ducey didn't win. If we end up losing Arizona, I think we ought to look back and say, well, was there a candidate who could have won, and why didn't they run, and is that good? You look at Colorado. I think Colorado was a winnable state, although given the tribalism that played out, it may have been less winnable than possible than initially it was perceived. I think Bennett was a very weak incumbent. I think he was vulnerable. But you look at the Republican candidate, Joe O'Dea. He's a business guy, never run for office, didn't know anything about politics. Nice guy. I met him. I liked him. I supported him. What killed him? One, he was massively outspent. But secondly, he went on one of the Sunday shows, and they asked him, hey, what do you think about Trump running in 24? And he said, well, I would actively oppose that. I think that's a bad idea, and I would campaign against him, and he listed several other people that he would support. Now, in a normal universe where you had someone trying to run in Colorado, trying to appeal to moderate or independent or liberals in the Denver suburbs, that's not an insane answer for someone to say in a state like that. But the reaction of Trump should have been obvious. At this point, Trump's reactions are entirely predictable and consistent.
Yes. He does not waver in his response.
The next day, Trump turned around and punched him in the face and told people, don't vote for the guy. And the race was lost at that point. Now, look, I wish O'Dea, when asked that question, that's not a hard question for O'Dea to dodge, to simply say, you know, I'm focused on 22 and the voters can worry about that in the future. But it is an example where the fact that you had a candidate who'd never run, who didn't understand, how are they going to try to get me to step on a landmine? The reason that's a landmine in Colorado is whatever answer he gave pissed off a big chunk of voters he needed. He needed all the Trump hardcore supporters to be with him to have a prayer, but he also needed to not alienate the rest of the voters. And so that combination, I think, was unfortunate.
You look at one of the other things.
There you go. Sununu won
by
14 points as governor, while at the same time we lose the Senate race.
That's shocking.
If the Democrats keep the Senate by 1 seat, Chris Sununu single-handedly could have changed that.
Which it's amazing it's going to come down to that. You look at Georgia now, we're seeing a little bit of a lead for Warnock. I don't think either person at this point in the night, it looks pretty clear they're not going to get to the 50+1 that you're going to need to win. That's going to go back to runoff. This could also be for the control of the Senate. It could all come down to Georgia, which is not a place we want to necessarily go back to.
Look, right now it looks like we're headed to a runoff in Georgia. Oh, this is good. Wisconsin, right now, it looks like Ron Johnson has a 3-point lead with 88% in, a 74,000 vote lead. That's positive. I think Ron will hold on. That's another seat. We need him to hold on. I think he will. Fetterman is up 62,000 votes with 83% in. And so how we deal with that. All right, Warnock is up right now.
Yeah.
Almost 30,000 votes with 95% in, but they're both below 50% right now, so it looks like we're headed to a runoff.
When you look at this, the media is obviously going to go really, really crazy in analyzing how much the Donald Trump endorsement helped or hurt. What is the takeaway from this, from that? Because they're going to spend weeks on this, saying was he an asset or did he take away? You look at he went all in that race in Michigan for Tudor Dixon. She lost there. That was called pretty early in the night.
No, he didn't. He didn't put money behind it.
Well, that's true.
Look, going all in when you have $100 million in the bank, go spend money. Tudor Dixon had no money.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was a massive differential in spending. Look, going all in is not sending out a tweet. Look, did it help or hurt? Both. It helped enormously. J.D. Vance would not be a senator without Donald Trump. Period, full stop. J.D. Vance was losing that primary. Trump came in, endorsed him, and it catapulted Vance to the lead. Now, it's clear that Trump's endorsement has a much bigger impact in a Republican primary than in a general election. That much is clear. With Vance, it turned out, and he's one of the exceptions. He'd never run before. He was a first-time candidate, and yet he proved more disciplined than some of the other first-time candidates. And I will say, you and I have talked at length about the nationwide month-long 17-state bus tour I did. I spent an entire day with J.D. Vance. I'd met J.D. before, but I didn't really know him. And he really impressed me. For one thing, when I came to Ohio, we gave him a day and said, use it. And we told that to other candidates.
Yeah.
His campaign did a better job of using my time. So they had 3 rallies all over the state in different parts of the state. They had a big fundraiser where they raised a bunch of money that they had me come to. On the bus in between each of the different stops, they had me on the phone nonstop to talk radio host all over the state. So they systematically, one call after the other. Now, you're particularly sympathetic to being on the phone with talk radio hosts.
Absolutely.
But it was impressive. The first rally we did was at 9 or 9:30 in the morning. And they had a packed house. They had hundreds of people come out early in the morning, or relatively early.
Yeah.
That's unusual. There are a lot of campaigns that can't do that. And so Trump won the primary for him, hands down. But I will say Vance ran a disciplined, effective campaign and won the general. And one of the lessons I think we need to take is to win in 22 and to win in 24, we've got to be united. We've got to have – there are disparate parts of the Republican Party where if we're at war, the Democrats win. Now, that doesn't mean that within the party we shouldn't press the party. Look, I have famously battled Republican leadership for years, and I fully expect going forward to continue doing so. We should have vigorous fights about what we should stand for and what we should do, and I'm going to press harder than anyone for the Republican majorities to act like it and deliver on our promises. By the way, we just saw Wisconsin narrow. It's now a 30,000 vote margin. That's less than ideal. And Fetterman's up 62,000 votes.
Which is just shocking to me in Pennsylvania that Fetterman, a guy that had the worst debate, I think, in history, modern political times, is actually winning by 62,000 votes as we do this at 11:52 Central Time at night over Dr. Oz there.
Now, I will say, by the way, in Pennsylvania, the Democrats have gone out of their way to say, remember, the votes won't be done on election night. We're going to be counting for days to come. So who the heck knows what kind of cluster is going to unfold in Pennsylvania. But the degree to which both Pennsylvania and Arizona, I don't know if the counting, and it may be true in Nevada also, that the counting could continue for some time. It seems...
I have a feeling we're going to be doing another verdict, a special one on Wednesday, because that's how long it's going to take to figure out what all this actually is going to look like.
But a clear lesson is when you go into a general election, you've got to unite the clans, to use a Braveheart reference. You've got to bring everyone together. If we're divided, we lose. Another clear lesson is you need effective, serious candidates. My philosophy is the strongest conservative who can win. And you got to have resources, that if we send our candidates in and they're being outspent 3-1 or 5-1 or 10-1, they will lose. And at the end of the day, we need to ask ourselves, do we want to lose our country because we're not funding these people? Because the differential is deeply concerning. So those are two significant takeaways.
Well, let's talk about the mindset for everyone that's hearing this. I think there's a lot of people that are going to be waking up and be a little bit depressed that this is the outcome. It is still significant that we're going to take back the House.
Yes.
That is something that is going to hold this administration accountable. It's going to be able to investigate this administration. It could lead to things like a possible impeachment and Mayorkas and other things like that that are very important, and accountability for Fauci and what he did with gain-of-function research and funding and Wuhan Institute of Virology and all of the things that happened there. Let's not overlook that. That is a big moment. We should celebrate it. And for people that might be a little bit down, don't be, because that is huge for this country.
Fully agree.
Senate-wise, I mean, this is that's where you serve. What's your takeaway?
I don't know. Looking at it right now, 96% in Georgia. Warnock's ahead. Walker's behind. Neither are over 50. If that goes to a runoff, it could be control of the Senate. Pennsylvania, right now, Fetterman's winning.
Yeah.
If we lose Pennsylvania, let's suppose we lose Pennsylvania and we win Nevada. And by the way, we don't have any numbers right now from Nevada, so I think Laxalt is a good candidate, but we've seen tribalism, Democrats returning to their team. I don't know that Adam wins Nevada. I hope he does. I want him to. I've campaigned with him repeatedly. I think he's a good candidate. But the results in other states are not suggesting the kind of red tsunami that...
There's some Nevada numbers that we just got in there. This is obviously with hardly any. This is maybe the first place coming in that's reporting there, with 0.14% coming in at 11:59. And these are going to change a lot because you're talking about one polling place or two coming in there. But like you said, you look at tribalism, that doesn't make you as hopeful there as we would have been a couple hours ago.
Yeah. So, listen, if we are looking at a scenario where we lose Pennsylvania and we win Nevada, then we're back to the runoff in Georgia determining control of the Senate.
That's not what we thought.
Assuming we don't win Arizona, and I guess there's an outside chance, but we're looking at the numbers right now, and Kelly's up 16 points, and now 50% is in. Maybe, but that's a big margin.
That's a big, I mean, when you're talking about 228,000 vote differential, that is significant. That would be a lot to overcome.
Now, you can't overgeneralize because it depends. Like, there can be really blue counties and really red counties, and it may be the blues are all in and the reds haven't come. So I've seen swings, but swings are typically in the 5-point range and not the 17-point range.
Yeah. This is not the night we were hoping for in the Senate. I think we can agree with that. There's the newest Nevada numbers. We just got a big dump that came in, 33% reporting there. Adam at 42%. She's at now at 54% up on the screen there. That is significant.
They just called Fetterman.
And this in Pennsylvania, this is not the news we were wanting.
Damn it.
And Fox News has just called the Fetterman race as the winner there, 49.4 to Oz at 48.2. That is a gain for the Democrats there. That now changes everything in the Senate, Senator.
We've got to win Georgia and Nevada to take control of the Senate and not lose Wisconsin.
I think you and I both thought at dinner we'd be 52, 53. That's gone
I was at 53, 54. That ain't happening. Maybe we get to 51. But we could easily be with the Democrat Senate. That losing Pennsylvania changes the math profoundly.
Now that they're calling it this way, the biggest mistake in Pennsylvania was picking Oz.
I did rallies all over the state of Pennsylvania with McCormick. I went all in.
By the way, people may not realize this. That was a very, very, very slim loss in number of votes that night.
It was a few thousand votes.
Yeah, a couple thousand votes.
And McCormick would have won tonight. So it may be that primary gave the Democrats the Senate. If that's the outcome, that's hard to stomach.
Hard to stomach. If you go back and look at that primary, it was a very divided primary, and there were forces that were involved that were very influential in picking Oz. That may have been one of the biggest mistakes for control of the Senate. Again, now everyone calling Pennsylvania now for Fetterman.
Look, that's not good.
Yeah.
It's not good for the country.
One thing I know for sure, we'll be doing another podcast, I think, on Wednesday, because it's not gonna end. We're not gonna know tonight, I think, for sure, as we're doing this at midnight.
But by the way, Ben, since this is airing tomorrow morning,
yes,
some of the folks watching it tomorrow morning will not have participated in our live event tonight. They may wonder why the hell we're drinking White Claws.
Yes, that's very true. We should end on at least an entertaining note. We are both having a White Claw. Will you ever drink another one of these the rest of your life?
I doubt it. This is the only White Claw in my life.
This is the only one I'm going to do as well.
I have ever drunk. It was mango. I like mango, but I tend, if I'm going to drink an alcoholic beverage, a beer is quite fine, or a glass of wine. I think hard seltzer is not my thing.
Well, in honor of you taking 2 shots of White Claw this week and blocking one, I figured it was entertaining. Why not?
So I had 2 cans, full cans, unopened cans of White Claw thrown at me. By the way, Ben, I'm going to say, so this is now an empty can because I've drunk it, so I'm going to throw it at you right now. That, by the way...
I'm not going to throw this one at you because mine's like 90%. Mine's like 90% full. I'm like the kid that's just holding the fake beer in college, right?
Yeah, no, well, then please don't throw it at me because I don't wish to smell of mango.
Yes.
Like... Okay, that will really, you come home to Heidi, you walk in the bedroom, and your husband stinks of mango. I don't even know what you accuse him of. Like, what are you, maybe I ran to Cancun.
You ran to Cancun. That would be the only thing. Where were you really tonight on election night?
But yes, in the victory parade for the Astros, where there were over 1 million people came out in Houston, there were some angry Democrats. Actually, I think every Beto supporter in the state came out, even though Beto lost by 12 points statewide. They were at the parade, and they were yelling and convinced their guy was going to win. And, one guy flung 2 full and unopened cans of White Claw, which I think the fact that it was White Claw is highly revealing.
Yes.
First one missed, landed in the vehicle. The second one was headed at me, and I blocked it with my arm, knocked it down in the vehicle. I wasn't hurt at all, but the fellow was arrested and is facing charges. And I will say I put out a statement thanking the police who did a fabulous job keeping me safe, arresting him. But I did say I'm glad the clown who threw his White Claw at me had a noodle for an arm, because if he could throw a 90-mile-an-hour fastball, I might have been in the hospital rather than here with you on the verdict stage.
That's very true. As we sign off tonight, Senator, biggest race you're happy that we won tonight, at least. I want to get that.
Mike Lee.
Biggest House race you're excited about for you? You busted your tail on the bus tour. There's got to be one that you're going, I love that victory.
So I haven't seen all the results. I need to go through the House victories. I'm very glad Monica Dela Cruz won. That's a big deal in the Valley.
History.
It is a seat that has been Democrat for over 100 years. And so the Valley is turning red. It didn't fully turn red this time. I thought it was this time, but it is moving that direction. I think that's a good thing.
Biggest shock race of the night for you?
Pennsylvania.
That's mine, too. I was hoping you were going to say that.
Look, I think Fetterman is such a radical candidate. And I'm sad that the party tribalism of Democrats in Pennsylvania trumped reason and rationality.
It's going to be very telling for the presidential election. Pennsylvania, this one tonight, for me, just tells me there is such a small number of voters that are willing to switch tribes, even with a terrible economy. And maybe it's more on the Democratic side, right, than the Republican side. But it is shocking to me that with how bad things are in this country and in Pennsylvania, that you still can't get people to vote for what may be best for their community. Instead, it's just, I'm a Democrat, damn it, and I'm going to always be a Democrat, and I'll vote for the most incompetent human being out there if they have a D next to their name. And that concerns me about the presidential, because it's no longer 3-4% of independents that you've got to swing, right? The swing voters. It may be down to half a percentage point in some of these states.
Look, this election was a turnout battle, and we'll see where turnout comes out. But we're going to have to process the numbers. I don't know how much of it was that ours didn't turn out as much as they needed to, and I don't know how much of it was that D's, despite everything being in the crapper, showed up and pulled the lever D anyway and said, give me more cowbell. That's just what I need. It's to mix my metaphors. I just did Christopher Walken, but let's go to Animal House. Thank you, sir. Can I have another? Apparently, they really like getting smacked with the board and want more of it. And that we need to do a better job making clear the stakes of these elections in people's lives. We mentioned before, this can't be a personality battle. It needs to be about substance and policy and how people can have a better life.
Yeah.
Or a worse life, because that's what the stakes are.
As we end tonight, 12:05 a.m. Central Time, after 1 o'clock Eastern Time. If there's any, I like to leave people with one thing that you can hold on to. Nancy Pelosi will no longer be the Speaker of the House. If there's anything that can get you fired back up, even if you're upset about where some of these races went, at least Nancy Pelosi will retire and we will not have to deal with her ever again.
And my side bet is she will become a constituent of Ron DeSantis's, which is particularly amusing because I think she'll retire to Florida and live on the beach, which is irony personified.
Hey, if we made any history night, you drink a White Claw, and I drank 1/10 of a White Claw tonight. Senator, I enjoyed sitting down with you doing this tonight live on Verdict. For everybody watching, I'll say it to you. Make sure you download the Verdict wherever you get your podcasts. We do it 3 times a week. 2 of them are audio only. So if you're watching this, make sure you download the podcast. For all of the people listening Wednesday morning with this podcast, I have a feeling we'll probably be putting out another one, letting you know after we get some of the more of these numbers in. So just download, hit that subscribe, auto download button on your phone, and then you'll automatically know when that next episode of ours drops. Senator, God bless America tonight. The people have spoken in many places. We may not like what they said everywhere, but at least this is the greatest country in the world, and people got to vote today, and that always makes me happy. Thank you, sir, and it was fun doing this with you tonight. All right, there we have it. See you guys online.